A very good morning, everyone. So thank you for joining the session working with Zoho Creator V2 API. So this is Monica Nirmal from the Zoho Creator training team, and I'll be your host for this day. So with that, before we get into the session, all the attendees here will be on mute. So you will not be able to communicate with me directly through mic. So if you have any questions throughout the session, feel free to post your questions in the questions panel, which you can find to the left side of your screen. And apart from this, this complete session will be recorded and will be shared with you post this session. And at the end, you will have a session survey. So please take your time to give your feedback regarding this session. So this would be really helpful for us. So in this session, we'll be learning about Zoho Creator V2 API or working with Zoho Creator's version 2 of API. So we're going to start off with explaining the version 1 of API. Followed by this, we will see the benefits of OAuth based authentication, which is the authentication applied in version 2 of API. Then we will learn about version 2 API structure and some important concepts. Once we get to know about V2 API, we will see a live demonstration where first we will see how to construct an API call with V2 API in a third-party service. Secondly, how to use V2 Deluge task in other Zoho's products to connect Zoho Creator instantly. And finally, we will see some of the best practices to migrate from version 1 of API to version 2 of API in Zoho Creator. So with that, let's get started. Version 1 of API. So whenever you need to connect two or more different online database platforms or services, you will require API. So API is Application Programming Interface, which is used to create a connection between two online database platform or applications. So basically, this API is like a communication channel between two different applications. So you can also consider API to be a translator who works between two different people with different languages. So this is how API is used as a communication channel between two different databases. And next, data transfer between two applications happens through authentication. So within authentication, we have two steps, which is request and response. So let's see how a basic authentication works and helps us in data transfer. So there are several types of authentication when we try to validate a request that is being sent from one particular service to another particular service. However, here we have a basic authentication. Apart from this, we have HTTP-based authentication, API key-based authentication, and OAuth-based authentication. So here we have a basic authentication process between a client and a server. You can consider a client to be Zoho Creator or server to be any other service or the vice versa. So consider two database or services. So here the first step is the client sends a request for a protected resource or data to the server. So they are going to request some data from the server. Secondly, in return, the server sends a request back to the client for a username and a password, some credentials to validate the request. So the third step is where the client sends a request with the username and password to the server. So once the server receives the username and password, the credentials, the server validates the credentials and returns back the protected resource or data back to the client. So this is how basically a request create, and this data has been shared between two different services. So that's a authentication process where the authenticating request that is being sent. So when we try to create a request, there are several methods we will be configuring. So we have methods like get, post, put, delete. So these are methods used when you try to create different set of actions. So if you're trying to push data to a third party service, in that case, you will be using post method or if you try to retrieve or get data from a third-party service, in that case, you will be using a get method. So likewise, based upon the action that you're going to perform, you will be choosing the particular method. So that's important when it comes to request. And when you're trying to create a request, there are several important things that you need to have within the request. That is the URL, which is request URL. So each and every particular request URL performs some actions. Some can create a record or some can delete a record. So you need to use the request URL followed by the parameters. It can be the header, scope, or any additional parameters or optional parameters that you need to add to the API request, along with the most important thing, which is the API key or token to authenticate the API request. So when it comes to API calls, basically we have two types of API calls which can be created. One is from the open documentation of Open API, which will not require API key. So Postman gives you some open documentation for the COVID cases. So you can pull and push data. So they don't have any authentication. So anyone can use their API keys. API request. So likewise, some particular API documentation will not have an authentication that needs to be done. They will have an open resource. Anyone can use the API call to get the data from the services. And for the protected resources, for protected data in a database, they will have the API key or token in order to validate the request and to share the data. So these are important parameters of request. So once you send a request, in return, the particular service or database sends back a response to the particular client. So these response can be of different formats based upon the type of service that you are utilizing. So it can be JSON or XML or many more, or CSV based upon the type of particular API documentation which you are utilizing, or based upon the format of response output which the particular service have defined. So that's about the response format over here. Next, let's talk about the version 1 of API. So version 1 of API V1 API supports REST API and XML RCP APIs. So REST APIs can be used to perform simple add, delete, and update operations. So it's going to enable a user to add only one record at a time in a specific application. So that's about the V1 applications API. However, kindly note the version 1 API will be deprecated soon, which is on February 3rd of 2021. So you will have to use the V1 API V2 API in place of V1 API. So if you have written V1 API somewhere else within the application, in that case, you need to migrate from V1 to V2 APIs to maintain the connection made earlier to be stable without any interruption in the data transfer. So that is important. So for both this XML RCP APIs and REST API, we will be generating a auth token, that's API key, in order to authenticate and validate the API request. So V1 version, we'll be using auth token API key. So once you generate the API key, it will be valid forever. So you can use the API key to create any type of push or pull data in Zoho Creator. So that's what we will be using in V1 version, this version 1 of API. Now let's talk about the components of V1 version 1 of API, which is request URL. So we have different versions of URL to add or edit or view a record. So based upon the request URL, the particular action will be performed into Zoho Creator. And next, the request method. So we have get and post. So based upon the action you're going to perform, if it's add record, then you will be using post method to push data into Creator. And the third is response format. So you can define it is either XML or JSON as response format in V1 version. So we have the option to define the type of response format that you would like to receive in return. And finally, the parameters, valid API auth token, and the scope, like creator API, which needs to be defined, which is a mandatory parameter. And if any inputs that you would like to push to a third-party service, or any criteria that you would like to mention or filter based upon which you would like to fetch data from Zoho Creator, you can add those parameters to the request URL. So that's about the components of V1 API. So with that, we have a sample request, a screenshot of the request. So here we have used the post method to create an API call, where we have passed the auth token, the generated auth token from the Zoho Creator account, followed by the scope ID, which is Creator API, in which we have added some inputs, which is the data that needs to be passed into Zoho Creator. Followed by this, we have the add record and submit value. So once this particular API request has been created, it is going to push data into Zoho Creator based upon the particular Zoho Creator account defined over here, based upon the application name. Here we have the response format to be XML, and the form is employee, which is a add record task. So it's going to push data into the employee form of the application sample, and the record will be created based upon the data configured over here. So once a particular request has been successfully created and initiated, we can get the response. So we can try to info the response. So the response can be either XML or JSON. So we can choose the response format in V1 API. So the first one is the JSON response, and the second one has the XML response. Here you can see the status and the record ID, or if you have any failure messages, even that would be created over here in the responses. So this is the basic concept of V1 API, which we were currently using earlier. So with that, let's see a comparison between V1 and V2. That is version 2 of API versus version 1 of API. So in version 2 of API, we have introduced OAuth based authentication, which is secure because we will be delegating access with respect to certain modules and not to the complete application or to the account. And V1 version, we will be using the API key authentication, which will be generated once and can be misused, or it can be misplaced, or can be stolen easily. And secondly, in V2 version, we have updated the methods with patch and delete methods. So this is supported here, whereas in V1 version, patch and delete methods are not supported, but still we have the post and get. Next, when we try to pull data from Zoho Creator using the get record API task, so earlier in V1 API, it would try to pull the list of records that we added to the particular form based upon the field names and the field data. All the field names and all the field data will be fetched from the respective form. However, in V2 version, we have two separate URLs, two separate tasks to pull data based upon quick view and detail view. So you can separately pull the quick view and detail view and not all the record at once. So that's one of the important point. And next, V2 API accepts only JSON inputs. So you cannot pass any other inputs like XML or any list of data. So you can only input JSON into the body of the API request. So that's important. And secondly, the return response cannot be defined manually. It's going to return just the JSON format. So you cannot get the XML format as a response. It would only give you the JSON format as response. Whereas in V1 version, the input can be added as list or list of maps or just maps. And the return for response is going to be either XML or JSON based upon the user definition. So they can define the particular response format to be either JSON or XML. However, in the V2 version, we cannot define that. It's going to be JSON format by default. And in V2, you can process a maximum of 200 records per request. However, in the V1 API, you can only add one particular record at a time. Apart from this, V2 API has better API structure than version 1. So more secure than V1 because we are using the OAuth based authentication, which is secure than API key based authentication, and better performs with respect to the structure of API or the particular structure of API code that's been written at the backend. And with respect to the error codes and messages, we have introduced the multiple error codes and messages based upon each and every particular error that's been occurring, even in the scripts or the particular authentication approvals. So we have introduced more error codes with respect to the messages so that you can come across different scenarios. So you can rectify them with respect to the error codes. We have a dedicated documentation There you can find the respective error codes and the messages. Now let's talk about the benefits of OAuth based authentication, which is used in the version 2 of API. So we're going to start off with an example for OAuth based authentication. Here we will see how Twitter has been authenticated by a third-party service. So we can consider third-party service to be Pinterest, CardOps, or even LinkedIn. You can consider any third-party service. Imagine any third-party service. If you're aware of Pinterest, you can imagine Pinterest as a third-party service here. If not, you can imagine any third-party service of your own. So in order to create a collaboration, a connection between a third-party service like Pinterest with Twitter account, first you need to authorize the Twitter account from the service. So in this example, consider we have a third-party service, Pinterest, from where you would like to push data with some information or data into Twitter account. Like you can post tweets into Twitter account from Pinterest. So from Pinterest, you're going to tweet some posts into your Twitter account. So in order to achieve this, first you need to authorize your Twitter account from the respective third-party service like Pinterest. So basically, once you try to authorize, it will redirect you back to the Twitter account to click the allow or to enter your credentials. So while you do that at the back end, you will be delegating some access permissions of your Twitter account to the Pinterest. So basically, you will not be sharing any credentials while you do so. Even if you try to enter your password, basically, you will try to delegate some access permissions to do some operations within your Twitter account. So even when you try to enter your password, the credentials will not be shared. So once you do so, once the authorization is completed, the third-party service has the permission, that is Pinterest has the permission to push data into your Twitter account. That is, it has the delegated access to post tweets into your Twitter account. So that's OAuth-based authentication in a real-time scenario. So you will not be sharing any API keys or the credentials. However, you'll be delegating some access to some parts of your application or database. So it's going to seamlessly connect the database and it's going to push or pull data continuously. So that's about the example of OAuth-based authentication. So basically, OAuth 2 is an open standard authorization framework. So the application clients can gain limited access to a particular user's data without sharing any credentials. So basically, once you try to authorize, they will get a limited access to a particular module so that they can seamlessly access a particular content within your application. So basically, OAuth is a framework and not a protocol. So during authentication process, you'll be accessing the access token to create the API request. So in V1 version, we saw the auth token, the API key to be passed to create the API request so that the particular server can validate the request, right? However, here in the V2 version, during OAuth process, you'll be using access token to validate the API request. So why we talk about OAuth authentication to be a secure place? Because the first thing is you can gain limited access to the particular module within the application. Secondly, the access token that you're going to generate here is not going to be permanent token because the lifetime of access token is going to be short. So each and every particular database has their own API documentation and access token that can be generated. So the lifetime of the access token can differ based upon each and every particular server of API scripts. So here in Zoho Creator, the access token's lifetime is 1 hour. So if you generate the access token, it's going to be there lively as in the time of 1 hour. So after 1 hour, this access token will be invalid. So you need to regenerate a new access token. So as we do the new access tokens each and every time by generating new access token each and every time, the data transfer will be secure. So even if the particular access token has been stolen or misplaced somewhere else, if they try to access the access token in the API request, they cannot access them because it will be invalid more than an hour. So you will be regenerating new access token to maintain the data transfer to be with a secure API connection. So in order to keep the access token live, we'll be using refresh token to refresh them. So to generate access token and refresh token, we need to follow multiple steps within the application, which we will see later in this session during the demonstration. So benefits of OAuth-based authentication. So using OAuth, you can verify the identity of the client, so who is accessing the respective service. Also provide delegated access to respective resource and not all. So that's the first point. So with the help of OAuth-based authentication, it allows you to both authenticate as well as authorize. And secondly, OAuth is more secure than other two authentication process like HTTP and API key because you don't have to share credentials or you will not be able to use a static API key to access data. So here the access token are generated based upon each and every particular scopes based upon certain limited access. So it would be valid for an hour. So it's going to be really secure. And secondly, the access token that is generated for the operation is going to be unique for each and every particular scope. That is, when I say scope, it's going to be for dedicated modules, either to create a record or to edit a particular record. It's going to define what the permission set that you have within the application based upon a particular module. So we can delegate access to perform some operations and not all. You'll also see the different scopes available in the upcoming slides during the demonstration. Next, we can revoke the tokens generated anytime. Even if you generate a particular access token and with a refresh token, you can try to use the revoke request API to revoke the refresh token and access token so that that cannot be used anymore. So if you mistakenly add or share any code with a particular user, in that case, that API key, that is access token, will be valid, or they will, if they have the refresh token, they can try to refresh the access token and they can utilize it, right? So in that case, you can use the revoke API request to revoke the access token that's been created within your application. So that's about the revoke and access token, which is valid for only an hour and can be used only within the defined scope. Next, the cons. Since the tokens are valid only for a short period, the developer must regenerate the access token using refresh token using schedules. So we have this particular one, but however, OAuth is going to be scalable and secure. So in spite of its complexity, because of its other advantages, you can choose the OAuth over other authentication methods. So yes, it has to be generated multiple times when they try to time out after an hour. However, this is going to be secure than any other authentication process. So you can choose the OAuth method. So that's about the benefits and disadvantages of OAuth-based authentication. With that, let's get into the structure of version 2 API. Before getting into the version 2 of API, I have a poll that need to be run. So you will have a pop-up on your screen now. So please answer the poll here. If you are utilizing the V1 version of API with the new application. Okay, so the maximum is the people are currently using the V1 version of API. However, few of them have migrated to V2 API. Okay, cool. So let's get into the V2 structure. So V2 API supports both the RESTful API, which supports OAuth-based authentication, which is more secure and safe. So as you can see here, V2 API supports OAuth-based authentication. So we'll be using the access token and refresh token to create the API calls between any third-party service to create a data transfer. So let's see the features and structure of V2 API. Then we will see how V2 API has to be authenticated and to push data into a Zoho Creator application. So the first feature is OAuth process. So V2 API supports OAuth authentication. Here in the left side, you can consider the client to be any third-party service from where you're going to push data into Zoho Creator. In the right, you have resource owner who owns the Zoho Creator account. And then we have the Zoho Creator's authorization server, which is used to generate the access and refresh token. And the last is the resource server from where we push or pull the data. So that's where the data will be stored in the resource server. There you can push and pull data with respect to the access token that's being generated. So let me explain the process over here. So the client, the third-party service application requests authorization or permission to access the protected resource owned by the resource owner of the Zoho Creator. So they're going to send an API request to authorize the particular resource owner with respect to the access that they need to gain. So once they access, they need to get a particular code, authorization code. So the resource owner first authenticates the client using the credentials. They will share a credential and then authorize it to access the requested resource by its authorization code. So Zoho Creator uses the authorization code grant type. So they will have a authorization code once you try to create the authorization request. So that's the first step. So this authorization request will be done upon Zoho Creator developer console. So there you'll get a authorization code. And the second step is to create API call to get the access and refresh token with respect to the authorization server using the authorization code generated during the authorization request process. That is, the client is going to exchange the authorization code with the authorization server for an access token and refresh token. So access tokens validity is a short time, 1 hour. However, refresh token is a permanent token without any expiration date. So you can use the refresh token to refresh the access tokens. And lastly, once you get the access token, it's just going to act like a API key that we used in V1 version. So you can use the access token to create an API request to add or get record from Zoho Creator resource server. So you can create API request to create any particular action, that is either add record or delete record to the resource server. So once the access token has been used in the API key to get the resource server, it's going to validate the access token and Zoho Creator resource server is going to share the protected resource back to the client. So that's how the OAuth process is going to work here. To share the protected resource, first you need to authorize to share the credentials and to get a grant type code, the authorization code. So once you get the authorization code, with the help of authorization code, you can create an API request to get the access token and refresh token. And later, once you get the access token, you can use the access token to get the protected resource from Zoho Creator. So here we have the APIs of version 2, Data API, File API, and Meta APIs. So these are the APIs that are used to perform individual operations listed here. If you need to add a record into Zoho Creator application, then you need to use the add record API. So each and every particular API has their own scope and parameter that needs to be used. Similarly, you can see we have get record, which has a option to get the quick view and detailed view alone. And for file APIs, you have the option to upload and download a file. And for Meta APIs, we have the option to retrieve list of fields or forms from a particular application or list of fields from a particular form or get applications from a particular Zoho Creator account. So likewise, you can use this to perform any particular application within Zoho Creator. Now we're going to see the process of authentication and data sharing within the API request. First, we will see the authentication process. So the steps in authentication process in Zoho Creator. The first step is to register the client application in Zoho Creator Developer Console, Zoho's Developer Console. Second is request the authorization code. And third is to generate the access token and refresh token using the authorization code. And once you try to get the access token, you can directly use it in the API request to push or pull data in Zoho Creator. And if the access token is invalid after an hour, if it's going to be expired, in that case, you can use a refresh token to refresh the access token. So refresh token has to be used in schedules in order to create a schedule every hour based upon the time of access token creation. And once the schedules has been created, the access token will be live. So you need to pass a new access token there in the API call. And you have the option to revoke the refresh token, so that the end user who has a new that is old access token cannot be refreshed. Even if they have a refresh token access to refresh the access token, they cannot refresh the access token because you can revoke them using the revoke API request. So as I said, the first step, so based upon the type of user that you're going to use, either for browser or HTTP or the HTTP server based application, or if it's going to be a browser based, you need to register the client in the Zoho's developer console. That's going to be the first step. So as I said, it's going to be based upon the client type. So I will explain you what the client types are during the demonstration. And if you're choosing the server based or the browser based, in that case, you need to use the home page URL and the redirect URL. So it's important. So you need to get the respective domain and pass the home page URL and redirect URL for the redirection purpose. And once you register the particular client, you will receive a client ID and client secret automatically. So you have to do anything. Once you type in the client details there with the homepage URL and redirect URL, you will get a client ID and client secret. So that's the first step. Second is to request the authorization code. So authorization code has to be done upon the same client panel in the Zoho's developer console. So authorization code can be generated using the client ID and client secret. So once you try to add the scopes within the client side server or HTTP or browser side client type within the particular generate option, there you will have option to add in these scopes. So you can try to add as many scopes as possible based upon your requirement. So when I say scope, scopes are used to delegate certain limited access to your user. So once you add in these scopes to either edit or delete or with any permission, they will have a authorization code generated. So this authorization code will be valid for a minute or 10 minutes. So we have a definition to define the minutes that can be used when it comes to the client side. And for server side, it will be valid for only a minute. So make sure you generate the access token and refresh token within the limited time frame. And third step is to generate the access token and refresh token. So with the help of the access code, that authorization code, you can generate the access token and refresh token. So access token is going to be valid only for an hour, and refresh token is going to be a permanent token, which can be used to refresh the access token. So here we can see the refresh token can be refreshed with the help of the access token. So the access token is going to be live, and a maximum of 5 refresh tokens can be generated per minute and not more than that. So if you try to refresh the access tokens, in that case, it would end up in error. Maximum of 5. More than that, it would end up in error. And fifth step is to revoke the refresh token. Now let's see how we can share the data. So once you get the access token, you can use it in the API call to create an API call to the resource server to get the data. So once you pass the access token, you need to pass the respective parameters of data that you're going to pass to the resource server, that is Zoho Creator. And once the API request has been created, the resource server is going to validate the access token and the URL, and it's going to share the protected resource to the third-party service. So here we have the components of P2 API request, which is the request URL, in which based upon the type of API. So here we have example of add record API, in which we have the base URL followed by the account owner name, application link name, and the form link name, into which you're going to push data. So here we have the base URL, which is important. I will show you how we need to configure the base URL. Next, the request method. So if you're going to push data to a third-party service, in that case, you need to utilize the post method. Likewise, if you're trying to retrieve data from Zoho Creator, in that case, you need to use the get method. So make sure you use the right type of method to create the API calls. And lastly, the header. So you need to pass the authorization, that is the access token, concatenating with Zoho OAuth token, which is the string, concatenate the generated as access token with the Zoho hyphen OAuth token string. And this needs to be passed in the header for the parameter authorization. So you can see an example over here. So this is how you need to pass the generated access token in the header for authorization parameter. So these are the three important factors that needs to be created to create a successful API request. So when we try to create API requests, the data that you're going to pass to push data into Creator should be or must be in JSON format only. And you should pass the data in the body of the API request. And you should mention the OAuth scope. So when you try to generate the particular authorization code, you need to generate the authorization code in the particular Zoho Developer Console with respect to the particular scope. If you try to create authorization code and access token for a create access, that is a particular permission with create permission, in that case, you cannot use that particular access token to edit a record in Zoho Creator database. So you need to generate a new access token based upon the scope available. And thirdly, the base URL, which you need to create in order to create the access token and the refresh token. So here, these are the available scopes within the Zoho Creator, which is zohocreator.form.create or read, update, or delete. So make sure you can either pass one or multiple scopes to generate the authorization code. And here we have the base URL. So if you are located in multiple locations, you will have different types of data centers like .eu, .au, .in, or .com. So based upon the type of data center or the type of application database you're using, you need to pass the respective base URL, which is accounts.zoho.the particular database. That is .eu or .au or .com. And another important point is with respect to API access. So we have newly introduced the API access under permission set. So if you share the application with a user, they will have an option where you can enable the API access or disable them. So if you enable this API access, the users, the shared users will have the option to access the API permission set to create the API calls and to get the respective data from the application. So they can access the pre-written script data access. So that's the API access over here. So here we have a request, sample request with respect to V2 API. You can see we have zohocreator.com V2 API. So this is going to be a add record task. You can see we have the JSON data format with respect to the authorization parameter where we have passed the authorization OAuth access token. And it's a post method to push data into Creator based upon the application Silker store and the form orders. So in the particular response, you can get the API status code or success or failure message and the data that's going to be pulled from the Zoho Creator database or pushed into the Zoho Creator database. So these can be visualized in the response as you can see here along with the record ID that's been created. Now let's talk about the construction of API call with V2 API in a third-party service. So to begin with, we're going to push data from Postman into Zoho Creator to test the V2 API. So requirements is you need to have the add record API task documentation of V2 API. And next, you need to generate the access and refresh token for the respective scope. And once you get the access token, you can create the API call from Postman like an external service into Creator. So let's see a demonstration here. So I have application visitor management in which I have different forms like modules in which I have employee modules, which I have the new employee form, and I have a visitor form to which I have multiple reports. And secondly, we have the contacts and the visitor request for web. So you can add a request for visitors, and we're going to have a demonstration upon the contacts form in this application, in the visitor management application. So basically in the contacts form, we have 4 fields, which is name field. Name field has 2 subfields, which is first and last name, and date of birth, which is a date field. Followed by the date field, we have an email field and the phone number field over here. So we have 4 fields configured in the contacts form of the visitor management application. So this is going to be the application owner name, and currently this application has been built in the data center of .in. So with that, let's see how to push data into the contacts form of visitor management application. So I'm going to use the Postman to be a third-party service here. So I'm going to open the Postman. So here we have a Postman. Now let's open up the Zoho Creator documentation. So you can find the Zoho Creator V2 API documentation under handout section, which is on your left side. So here we have the V2 API documentation. Once you get into the documentation on your left, you can see we have the OAuth authentication process. So we have the steps in which we can register the client. So the first step is to register the client in the Zoho's developer console. So we have different types of client over here. So first one is client-based application. It's not going to be run upon any web service. And second is server-based application. And third is mobile-based application if you run the application specifically on smartphones and tablets, or non-browsers application without any device such as smart TVs or printers. And lastly, the self-client. This is to test the API's V2 API request. So today we'll be using the self-client. So this is where we'll be registering the client to create the client ID, client secret, and authorization code. So here we have the steps. However, we're going to open the Zoho's developer console. So here you can create the registration for the clients. So as I said, you can choose the respective type of client and you can create the authorization code. So for now, to test the API, I'm going to create the self client. So choosing the self client from the list, enable self client, in which you will create a client ID and client secret automatically. And next you will have an option to generate the code, the authorization code, where you need to enter the respective scopes. So here I'm entering the different types of scopes like Zoho creator.form.create, and followed by this read operation, delete, update, and many more. So I'm just adding list of scopes over here with comma separated values, and let's have a maximum duration to be 10. So let's see, test and create. Now this is going to be the generated authorization code. You can copy this and use it in your Postman. So first, let's see how to create the access token and refresh token. So first we have generated the authorization code. Next, we need to generate the access token and refresh token, which is the third step. So when you get into the option to generate the access token and refresh token with help of the authorization code, we have a request URL. Just copy this and see if the method is post or get. So here the method is post. So get into the Postman. Now let me create a new collection. V2 API demonstration, in which I'm going to add a new request. Generate access and refresh token. So here we have the request URL which can be created. Now the method is going to be post here. and let's paste the request URL. So here we need to replace the base accounts URL with accounts.zoho.in because the application which I have created is in .in. So I need to use the base URL to be .in over here. So once you place that, you can see the parameters which has the dummy values for client ID, client secret, redirect URI. So for the self client, we don't have the redirect URI we have because we didn't configure a redirect URL there. So I'm just going to disable this. However, if you add the redirect URL with any other option client type that you choose, you can add the redirect URL over there. Now we need to copy and paste the client secret, client ID and authorization code. So let's get into the console. And first, let's copy the generated code over here. Next, client ID. Get back to the client secret. Copy the client ID and copy the client secret. Now we have pasted the parameters and the base URL has been changed. You can click on send. This would give you the access and refresh token. So we have completed the third step to generate the access and refresh token. Now you can use this access token to create API calls to add or pull a record from the Zoho Creator database. So let's quickly copy this and let's create another request. So adding another request here, which can be add record in Zoho Creator. So here we have a new request URL. So this is going to be a post method because we'll be using the add record task. So you'll see how that needs to be generated. So the third step is being completed to generate the access and refresh token. However, we'll see how to refresh the access token later. Now I'm going to choose the data APIs. We also have file and meta APIs. So here I'm going to choose the data API in which I'm going to choose the add record task to push data into Zoho Creator. You can see we have again request URL, the method post and header that needs to be passed. And they have a scope that needs to be definitely mentioned when you try to create the authorization code. So here, since we have passed multiple scopes along with create, here it's not a problem. So we have the operation to create a record in Zoho Creator. Let me quickly copy this and paste it here in the URL. And here this base URL to create the API call should be creator.zoho.in because this is to create a record in Zoho Creator. This is to create the API request to share the data. So for sharing the data, you need to pass creator.zoho.in to be the base URL. However, to create the access token or refresh token or to revoke or refresh the tokens, you need to pass accounts.zoho.in or com or EU. And next, we need to get the account owner name, app link name, and form name. So let's replace these one. So get into the application, copying the username on the top in the URL. So replacing the username and the application link name, which is visitor management. Next, the form name, which is contacts. Choosing the form name and adding it to the URL. So that's the first step. We have chosen the post method and we have changed the creator.zoho.in to be the base URL and the application owner name, application name, and form name. Now let's get into the headers in which you need to type in the authorization, in which you need to pass the authorization code. Let's see how to pass that. Let's use the add record documentation here in which you need to copy the string which is here, which is mandatory, Zoho-OAuth token. And next, let's save this and get back to the tab where we generated the access token. Copy the access token generated over here and get into the authorization and add the access token and append this to Zoho OAuth token. And next, I'm going to add an additional component here, which is going to be content type, the application JSON. So I've added everything over here. Now we need to get into the body to add the data. So let's choose the option raw, whereas I'm just going to copy and paste the JSON data over here. So I'm going to choose the JSON data. So I have already pre-written a JSON structure script. So I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. So you have the same configuration structure that needs to be added over here. So let me quickly show this. Okay, here you have the structure of JSON. So you can refer this if you like to push data into address field or a single line field or a multi-line field, you can follow the same JSON structure. So we have given the complete option for configuration of several fields. You can make use of this to push data into Zoho Creator. So this is how the JSON structure needs to be created. So here within the data, the parameter, the JSON structure, the JSON string, I'm trying to pass the date of birth, which is the field link name. So this should be the field link name of the form. And here you can either hard code or pass the value from the respective database. And email field followed by the phone number field. So I'm using the field link name. And for the name field, since I have the subfields, I'm creating a separate map within this where I'm passing the name and first and last name into the name over here as values for the key name. So same manner, you need to generate the operations for JSON script for the address field too. So you need to follow the same format for the address field to create the JSON format. So that's been created. Now let's get back to the headers and let's click on save and click send. You can see we have received a success message, which is data added successfully with the record ID. So the record ID is, lastly, we have 049. Let's copy this. And we have a status code, which is 3000. Let's get back to the application under the contacts, all contacts, which is the report of contacts. So this is the record which has been newly created over here. Now let's try to change some data and check. Robert Wilson. I'm adding the name and save. Click on send. This is going to create a new record ID. So let's copy this. Data added successfully. Now let's try to refresh. You can see we have the newly added data over here. So this is how you need to push data into Zoho Creator with respect to the access token. And if the access token is invalid, in that case, you need to create the refresh token, right? So refresh the access token. So let's see how to do that. So let me create a new request. So in which it's going to be a post method again. So here under the OAuth authorization, we have the fourth step to refresh the access token. It's going to be the same process, just copy paste the request URL and replace the respective parameters. So the base URL, accounts URL is going to be accounts.zoho.in. Followed by this, here in the refresh token, we need to pass the refresh token generated during the first request, API request, that will be generated the access token. So first, let's pass the client ID and client secret. Client secret has been passed. So brand type should be refresh token. And the refresh token here should be passed from the refresh token, which we got response over here earlier. Refresh token. which we received. Now let's pass the refresh token, save, and click on send to create the API request. So we have received a new access token. So this is going to be a newly created access token, which you need to pass again to the respective API request, the add record task here. So similarly, the same process applied when you try to revoke the refresh token. So you can follow the API documentation to revoke the refresh token. Add in the refresh token and you can revoke them instantly. So with the help of this, you can easily try to use any data API or file API to create or update records in Creator. Now that's about the Postman process to create record into Creator. Now let me show you how you need to see a visualization in Java that can be created to push data into Zoho Creator. So here I have a sample library with a Java file. Let me quickly open up this. So this is a file where we have written the JavaScript to create multiple add record, delete record within the application. So I have shared the same script on the handout section for Python 2. You can also find the Java and Python directly in the handout section where we have a workdrive link which is being embedded as a link. When you open the link, the folder will have two files which are Java as well as Python. You can quickly download this now. So here we have written the JavaScript where we need to hard code the access token. So let me quickly open up the Postman to get the access token generated. So let's choose the access token here. So this is where we generated the access token and refresh token earlier with respect to the authorization code. So I'm copying the same access token which we generated. So this is going to be utilized here. I'm going to delete this access token and replace it and save. So that's been saved now. Let's open up the terminal. I'm going to open the folder in which I have the Java file. Here I have list of files, Java file, class file, the library. So I'm going to run this file, run.sh. So this particular API functionality, the script which I have written in Java is going to get the list of application from the account which I have created. So basically I have two applications in the Zoho Creator account, the appointment management and visitor management. So within the visitor management, so here I have option, select the application. So let's choose the second application too, in which I can choose an operation to add or view or delete a record. So I'm going to choose the first operation to add a record into Zoho Creator application, which is on the application visitor management. And the form here is going to be contacts form, the same form. So here you need to add the JSON data. So for the JSON data, I'm going to quickly open up this. I have a JSON data. So you need to add the JSON data in a same line. Paste the JSON data. And here you can see the record has been added successfully with the record ID. So you can also perform other set of tasks. So since we have written the add record, view record, edit record for different functionalities, you can check the script to create the API call. So let's get back to the application here. Choose all contacts form. So let's copy paste the record ID. Now you can see this is the record which is being created now from the JavaScript which we have executed. So this is how you need to push. Similarly, we have the Python script which you can find under the handout section. So please download the links that has been embedded in the handout section which will be useful for you. So that's about the JavaScript which has been written to execute such a particular procedure. So let's terminate this and get back to the slides. So some of the questions you may come across. So can we connect Zoho Creator with all online services or platforms? So you can connect Zoho Creator with different online services. Yes, if they have a possibility to create API calls or webhooks that is available. However, for OAuth based authentication, webhooks is a limitation. We will see how that needs to be done. So you can connect Zoho Creator with the online database service if they have the option to connect with API calls. And secondly, can we write the OAuth-based authentication call in webhooks in a third-party service? That is, can we use OAuth-based API call to create access and refresh tokens? Okay. So for this question, no, they are stateless because webhooks are stateless. And if we have an option to pass a variable, in some cases, if the particular third-party service has an option to pass the access token, a new access token as a variable in the webhooks, in that case, yes, we can do that if they support. And if they don't have the option to write up, there is webhooks with that particular functionality to pass the access token dynamically. In that case, if the particular third-party service has an option to write a custom scripts, where a place where you can write the custom scripts like Java or Python, you need to use the respective custom script builder there in the respective third-party service like Shopify or QuickBooks, and write the API call to generate the access token or to create the API call. And with respect to the schedules, they need to have a scheduling functionality in a third-party service. Only then you can use the schedule operation and trigger the schedules on an hourly basis or based upon the first access token creation time, based upon the expiration time. You can try to create new access token and pass the newly generated access token to the particular API request call, either to add or edit or delete a record in Zoho Creator. So that's important. So if they have any alternative solution to write custom function for OAuth based API scripts in their end, you can also utilize that. So you need to reach the respective third-party service in which you are going to write the API call to push data into Zoho Creator. You need to contact them, and from there you need to get the respective functionalities which they are using currently to create the API call. So if they have an option to pass dynamically the access token in webhooks, yes, you can do that. If not, ask for a particular functionality to write a custom script in Java or Python and included these schedules. So you need to have schedules to run them on a periodically basis, on a hourly basis to create new access token. So that needs to be passed every time in the API call, and that's important. And the last question, how to write OAuth based API call in a third-party service. So either write a custom function in the database script builder, which they have provided, or function using the supported languages like C#, Java, Python, PHP, or SQL. So if the service provides you with the option to write schedules and you can pass new access token dynamically to the API request, so that's wonderful. You can do that. So that's the proper way you need to create API calls in third-party service. Or if they don't have any option, if they just have webhooks without any operation to pass the access token dynamically, in that case, you need to definitely opt for a third-party service like Zoho Flow, Zapier to establish the connection between them. So Zoho Flow, Zapier has the connection to establish with the application. So the backend, they will be handling the code, so you don't have to worry about that. So they will be handling the complete process. You can just drag and drop and create a connection So that was seamlessly push and pull data and create a data transfer between Zoho Creator and any third-party service. Next, lastly, we're going to see how to use Deluge task, Zoho Creator V2 Deluge task in other Zoho's product. So when it comes to Deluge task, Zoho Creator had a V1 Deluge task, version 1 of Deluge task, like we had for version 1 of API documentation. So we will see how to use that. So today we're going to push data from Zoho CRM to Zoho Creator. So for this, V1 integration tasks are already deprecated. So it will be in working condition till February 3rd, 2021. So after that, even the particular V1 API which is being pre-written, even that will be completely removed. That will not be in working condition. That is the V1 API integration task. So here we have the list of V2 integration tasks like get record or get record by ID, or to create a record, update record, or to update a specific record. Next, we have the syntax to create a record. So we have variable equals zoho.create record, in which you need to pass the owner name, app link name, form name, input values, that is data you're going to push, or any additional parameters if needed, with a connection. So the most important concept of integration task is to create an OAuth connection in the respective Zoho service. So input values should be in data and map or list of maps. So for optional parameter, if you don't have any other additional parameters that you need to add like conditions or criteria, in that case, you need to add a empty map. So that's important. So we need to have a Zoho integration task documentation. You can find the V2 creator integration task documentation in the handles section. And then you need to create a Zoho OAuth connection in Zoho CRM using the scope. So again, scope is important. So OAuth connection is required to create based upon the scope. And write an integration task in Zoho CRM to add record in Zoho Creator. So let's see a demonstration here. So here I have the application. So it's going to be a similar process to push data into the contacts module. Let me get back to the Zoho CRM. So here in Zoho CRM, I have a contacts module already in which I have the list of data. Now, when I try to add a new record in the contacts module here, it needs to create a record in Zoho Creator. So that's going to be the task here. In order to achieve this, first you need to get into the settings of the Zoho CRM, the setup option, in which we have an option of developer space where you can find the connections. So get into the connection. So here I have already created a connection. So I'm going to edit this. You can also add a new connection by clicking on add connection here. Click on edit. So add a connection name and choose the respective scope. So here you can see the respective scopes of different Zoho services. Today we're going to choose only one scope, which is to create a record in Zoho Creator. So once you create this, update and make sure you copy the connection name, which needs to be used when we create the API integration task. So once you create the connection, you need to perform some of the workflow rules. So again, get into the setup. Under automation, you can find the workflow rules. Choose the workflow rules. There you need to create a new rule. So I have already created a rule. So I'm going to get into this and explain you that. So you need to choose when this has to be created. That is when to create a record when the particular contacts has been added in the contacts form. So you need to choose the contacts form initially, then choose the create option, and you'll have an option to add a condition to apply this for certain records or for all records. So I'm going to choose all contacts in this case to execute this for all contacts. And next we have an option to configure webhook or functions. So here I'm adding a function to create custom actions. So let's edit the function over here and I'm going to show you how we have created this. So basically when you click on function, you can see you have an option where you have written the custom scripts. So we have an option to drag and drop the integration scripts. So when you try to drag and drop the in integration, which is under the integrations module, drag and drop the integrations. So this would give you the syntax to create the respective values. So type in response, choose the service, which is the creator, and add in the action either to create a record or to update a record, and then you need to add in the parameter like we have over here. So as you can see here, it gives you the complete value that needs to be added. So let's delete this, and you can see we have a syntax on the top. However, let's open up the Zoho V2 integration task documentation. Integration task. So within this integration task of Zoho service, we have different tasks to create different integration within different Zoho services. So let's check the Zoho Creator's V2 integration task. So here we have the list of integration tasks. We still have the V1 integration task, but it's deprecated. This is just for your reference. So here we have the V2 API Zoho integration task. Let's choose create record, in which you can see the syntax that needs to be followed. However, we have a drag and drop feature in the Deluge builder. So you can also create multiple records. So you can refer the example here, which is variable equals Zoho dot creator dot create record, in which you need to add the owner name, app link name, form link name, input values as a map or list of maps, and any other optional parameter along with the connection name. So this is how you have utilized the particular function here. So this is the syntax which we have used. Let me zoom in. You can see Zoho.creator.create record, the owner name, application name, which is visitor management, the form name, and have passed two maps over here, data map and other parameter. And finally, the connection name, which we created in the Zoho OAuth connection under connections. So this is important. Make sure you pass the right type of connection name. So that's important. If it's going to be a different one, then the particular integration connection will not be created. So first, I'm going to create the data map here. So I have created a map. That's the first step. Then I have created another map, contact name, because I need to add first name and last name, which should be created as a map. So I have a contact name, right? So basically the name field has subfields, which is first name and last name. That's the reason I'm creating a separate map for first and last name. So contact name dot put first name and contact name dot put last name. Similarly, within a data map, I'm going to add the name, which is the field link name within the contact form. And contact name is the map which we have created. So I'm passing this for the as value to the key name. And for date of birth, the field link name, I'm passing the DV, the value which we have in the contact us form. And similarly, we have the email and phone number, which is passed into the map. So you may think that what fn and ln is about. So these are the arguments which I have added to the function. So click on edit arguments on the top. This will give you the option to add a new argument. So you need to add a key. So it can be any key which you're going to add. So this is the key which you will be utilizing later in the maps. And type in hash to choose the respective module of the contact module of the Zoho CRM, in which you can choose the respective field. For example, the title. Click on done. That would be added here. So once you click on save, and for example, let me try to delete this. And when you type it, you will get the respective parameters which you have configured as arguments. However, we have configured test, right? So if you type in T, it will give you the test string which you have configured as new argument. So likewise, you can pass the arguments over here. So phone number, we're going to pass the phone number of the contacts module. And for the additional parameters, today we don't have any additional parameters. So just create an empty map over here, other parameters, and I'm passing that parameters over here. So data map is where you will have the first name, last name as a name field, and date of birth, email, and phone number separately. So now the connection has been established. Let's get back to the application. Get into the contacts module. You need to save this in order to execute that, save the workflow, and later get into the contacts module, in which let's create a new contact in the Zoho CRM. Let's add the first name to be Harry Wilson, email to be harry@ml.com, the phone number, a sample phone number, which can be added. So these are the details, the mandatory details which I have added. Let's click on save. So here we have the record created in Zoho CRM. Let's access Zoho Creator, all contacts form. So you can see we have Harry Wilson, new record which is being created along with the date of creation, which is the time which I have added here, phone number and email address. So this is how you need to create an OAuth connection and instantly use the Zoho Creator integration task, V2 integration task to push data into Zoho Creator. I hope that's clear. So with that, the demonstration is completed. Now let's move on with the migration part. So for the migration, there are several steps that's important when you try to follow the migration. Try to visit the necessary reasons that you utilize the V1 API. Try to check wherever you have written the V1 API within the current application. And then identify what are the scopes that are required in order to create the particular API request. So try to check what are the API actions that you have created, like add record or delete record in your current application. And based upon those scopes, register your application in Zoho Developer Console and try to generate the IDs and authorization code as well as the refresh and access token. So make sure you register the right type of client to use the Zoho Creator API. And followed by this, once you register the access and refresh token, you need to change the input format in the API request. Sometimes in the API call, you may have given a XML format or CSV format or just list values as input or maps. In that case, you make sure you pass the input format in the body of the API request. That is important, not as a parameter up in the URL. Make sure you pass them in the body of the API request as a JSON format. Also check if you are trying to return XML format from the response, because by default V2 API is going to give you the JSON format. So it's going to off JSON format. Next, set up connections from Zoho applications to use the corresponding credentials, scopes, and access token. So make sure you create connections from respective applications. That is, if you're trying to use the Zoho services, in that case, you'll be using OAuth connection. However, if you're trying to replicate the V1 API task, if it's going to be add record task, you need to set up a connection for respective client or the server or mobile-based or non-browser-based client. You need to create the respective scope and generate the access token based upon that. And make sure you generate the right type of authorization code based upon the respective scope that you would like to delegate the access for. So you can try the Zoho Creator from the www.zoho.com/creator/. So you can try to create a trial account and start creating the applications and try testing them. And if you have any questions later, since we will not be able to address all, please reach our support team, or if you are a new customer, you can reach our pre-sales team. So you can find the email address of pre-sales team, which is presales@zohocreator.com and support@zohocreator.com. So thank you everyone for the active participation. There was lots of questions, lots of interaction. It was an amazing collaboration that happened today. So thank you so much. I hope everyone would have gained some knowledge or some important points with respect to V2 API. So I hope I have delivered it. So with that, thank you everyone. So I wish you all the best for your future.